Hello and welcome back to the From My Prospective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could change the football landscape in the very near future. Okay, so today, just like last week, we've got grades on certain transfer players in college football that are moving on to their next place. So we're going to look at it, really break down what they are fit-wise, player-wise, just overall how I feel about this specific transfer. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about a certain offensive coordinator at a very large school moving from college football back to the pros. So before we get into any of that, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe. It helps me out a ton. It's free to you, and I'm just trying to grow the channel. Okay, so obviously the person in question here is Bill O'Brien, most likely in the thumbnail of this video. And yeah, he's decided, you know what? He's done with Bama, he's done with college football, formerly a Penn State head coach and now formerly Alabama's offensive coordinator. He's going back to New England with Bill Belichick to be their offensive coordinator. Now, I think the obvious statement here to be made is that is likely a play to become a head coach once more in the National Football League. And hot take incoming here, you can argue with yourself in the comments for all I care. But, at the end of the day, if he gets another head coaching job in the NFL, I think he's immediately a top 12 head coach in the NFL. Now, if he's a GM, he's bottom 5 GMs in the NFL because, every success that he had on the field, every triumph he had on the gridiron, there was a downfall in the front office there. So I wouldn't give him that kind of role again. But overall, I think he's a very good head coach, and this move really does make more sense to me than staying with Alabama would have. He's a good offensive coordinator, or at least I think he's good. I know, Alabama was a little bit divided on him this year, but overall, it's hard to find voices for the locker room better, more experienced, and more willing to be the offensive coordinator in this situation, despite the fact that his resume does speak for itself, than Bill O'Brien. Like, Bill O'Brien is one of those guys that that should have been a head coach in college football as soon as he was let go from the NFL, in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. What we're really wanting to focus on here is the immediate impact for Alabama. Now, my big worry for Saban, and, I don't even know that I qualified it really as a worry because it is still Nick Saban at the end of the day, but, it's so late in the hiring cycle to find a new offensive coordinator. And granted, you can call up, Josh Gaddis, or you can call up Joe Brady, which are the first two names that came to mind to me when I saw Bill O'Brien was going back to the league. But, it's going to be difficult to try to get those guys out of those positions strictly because, if they were going to leave, they probably would have left already. So I'm very interested as far as a full list of guys who could potentially take this role. I don't have one for you right now. And realistically, so long as Saban does not have a new hire next week before we record the podcast, I will probably make next week's episode fully revolvent around that. But this week, I wanted to include the running backs and follow up on that grading. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I would love to dwell on that, but I do want to save a little bit of it for next week and really let potential candidates emerge and let things come to light. So let's just go ahead and hop into the running back section, starting with a running back leaving USF, going to Auburn, and being one of Hugh Freeze's first hand-picked guys to join the program with him. We're talking about Brian Battie, formerly a USF Bull, like I said, now going to be an Auburn Tiger. Overall here, I'd be lying to you if I said that I'd watched a bunch of USF games this year, or, that I was a huge Brian Battie fan before he was moving up to the SEC, because I'll be honest with you, I really didn't hear a whole lot about him, and it probably stemmed from not watching too many USF games. But here's what I do know. I dove into the tape, I dove into his stat lines and this, that, and the other, and really tried to get a more complete picture of who he is. And I've got to say, I'm interested, but I'm not blown away. So as a running back, he is coming off of a year where he had around 1,200 rushing yards, 8 scores. He's also got 3 kick return touchdowns in his, catalog of his career. So, maybe if he doesn't carve out a big enough role with Auburn as a running back, that could be a potential spot that he slots into. Concerns here, he is 5'8". He's 5'8", 170, and he's not really all of that valuable in the passing game, which is a little bit strange. Now, maybe that was situational. Maybe he just didn't get the opportunities to really be involved in such. But, typically smaller backs like Petit would make themselves more valuable by also being an additional receiving threat. That's not really something that was prominent on Petit's tape, so interested to see how that develops. Now, as far as a grade overall, I like the promise there that Freeze has said, look, I like you. I want to bring you from USF up to Auburn and potentially be a running back that I use and implore in many different ways. But overall, I'm gonna stick around a C plus here for my overall because I don't think he's an offense-changing weapon. I think he's probably more of a catalyst to implement Hugh Freeze's changes and how he wants to kind of correct things within the Auburn program. I don't think that he's bringing Petit for a potential Heisman run or a potential, final piece in his national championship team. But I do think that overall he could be a very strong fill-in the time and somebody who you give maybe RB2 role or, kind of mess around with the formula there, but not somebody you fully allow to become running back one in your university, because I don't really feel that he is a true RB1 in the SEC. I feel like there's a couple different things missing from his game that I'm not just totally sold on. Okay, so the next one, though, I will admit I do think this running back could be a legitimate guy that you need to know about next season. This is one of the guys that I was most impressed with, both entering the transfer portal as a running back. I really, the total group I didn't find to be all that great. But there were a couple different names, and this was one of them. Treshaun Ward leaving Florida State to go to Kansas State. So Treshaun Ward, there's a chance that you've probably heard of him because Florida State played in some pretty high-profile games, and he was their secondary back behind Trey Benson, but you can still see his value both on the stat sheet with your eyes if you watch the tape, because he had over 600 yards last year, 7 on the ground, and that was still as the secondary back on a team that really did strive for balance. So, coming in for Trey Benson whenever he was tired and doing that was, that's a certain level of quality. But when you have Jordan Travis, who a lot of people feel very highly on, and, somebody who I feel like Florida State played in a lot of close games. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but, for him to be trusted with roles in games that matter, because Florida State, I do know, played in a lot of games that mattered this year, to get that positioning on that team speaks a lot about how talented of a running back he absolutely can be. Now, he didn't get involved too much in the passing game, but unlike Petit, who we just spoke about, I did see a lot more value on his tape. That one, I can almost assure you, was more situationally than it was actually talent-wise, because he had a couple good catches on his reel. Obviously, open space, he is a good runner because that's, naturally what running backs do. But, I feel like he does bring something to the party there. I just don't know that he will be a full-blown receiving back if that's what Kansas State wants him for. Luckily, though, I'm pretty sure that's not what Kansas State wants him for. So, obviously, as you can probably tell by how I've spoken, 5'10", 195. I really like his traits. I like what he brings to the table. He's a good running back, in my opinion. Now we have to look at fit in Kansas State. The big upside, Deuce Vaughn, they're, clear-cut, no questions asked, undoubted number one running back. He's gone to the NFL. So there is a giant hole in Kansas State's offense that needed to be filled by probably a transfer portal running back, and Treshaun Ward could absolutely be that guy. There is a very clear spot for Ward in this team that he just finished as Big 12 champs to become a significant contributor under a quality head coach. Now, that doesn't come along every day. Literally a Power Fives conference champion winner team brought him over to be their undoubted starting running back, despite the fact that one of their other running backs, the one that just left, I believe Deuce had like 1,500 yards last year. So, I am giving this one a B plus. It's not an A strictly because we haven't fully seen him commit and get to establish himself in the number one role in his career before, but I feel super optimistic about this landing spot. So, B plus was the absolute lowest I could go because I did mess around and have it as an A minus for a minute, but I did ultimately settle on a B plus for now at least. Trayshawn Ward is a name that, maybe you haven't heard of yet, and I do fully believe could be a true factor in not only the Big 12 actually, but just for college football because, you get these high level players that really break out every single year. And I think you should keep an eye on Ward's ability to do as such for the upcoming season. But now I want to kind of transition over to one that might be a little bit controversial, especially with recent events. So Dylan Johnson was formerly a running back at Mississippi State. Now, if that name might sound familiar to you, and you're thinking, well, I didn't watch a whole lot of Mississippi State football. I can place it, but I can't figure it out. It is because Dylan Johnson is the running back that whenever he announced that he was going to the portal, kind of took some shots at now deceased coach Mike Leach, rest in peace, saying that Coach Leach said that he was, quote, not very tough, and that Leach was glad he was leaving. That was, I remember that being a relatively large thing because obviously you don't see kids taking shots at their former coaches as they're walking out the door very often, but that's what Johnson did. And now he has found a new home. He's going from Mississippi State now to the Pac-12 and joining Washington. No matter how those comments make you feel, no matter how you perceive players doing that or you perceive Johnson doing that, I am a bit concerned that he might struggle to find a role in Washington's rotation. So the Huskies, it's no secret that they like to throw the ball. They did it 572 times last year. Michael Penix Jr. let the thing fly more often than he didn't. But they had their success on the ground too. Wayne Talapapa and Cameron Davis both had double-digit rushing touchdowns. Neither one of them eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark, but, got in whenever they were in the red zone, they finished off the drives. And that's about all you really are asking for when you are Washington, because you're going to let the ball fly and then you're going to hand it off. Simple as that. So, they also just landed Daniel Ngata from Arizona State. He's now going to be in Spokane as well. So Talapapa has departed the program. He's going to the draft, but that leaves 3 different running backs potentially trying to carve out their own role. You've got the familiarity there with Cameron Davis. You've got Ngata, who transferred first, and now you've got Dylan Johnson, who's in next. You've got so many different bodies, and even if they do decide to truly commit to 2 backs this year, it's going to be a toss-up between Johnson and Ngata. So I'm interested to see what materializes of that. I do think Johnson has a lot of talent. I'm just not really sure that he's going to get a better look than like as a third down back for the Huskies, as an additional receiving option. So you look at what was sitting on the table whenever he signed Washington. He had offers reportedly from Auburn, Syracuse, and Louisville. Those are the ones that I saw. There might have been more. One of them might have not even been a real offer, but that's just the things that I saw that were rumored. Knowing that I would have liked 2 of these schools as better fits. Obviously, I wouldn't have gone to Auburn. Because I don't really feel just great about Auburn year one anyways, but Syracuse I think could have been interesting, and Louisville I think could have been pretty neat. So the fact that he chose to go to Washington this year, I'm going to give a D plus. It feels like better fits were out there to me. Maybe he'll circle back around and prove me wrong and end up being this, elite running back in college football and really be the missing piece for Washington and help them win the Pac-12 and be in the college football playoffs and this, that, and the other. I'm just not buying it right now. I think there's too many mouths to feed in that offense, and I think, Johnson joining that laundry list truly of guys who need to be fed out there just didn't really feel right to me. So this next running back that we're going to talk about, this guy is the one that whenever I saw him come up on the portal, about halfway through the year, I realized he was going to be in the portal. But whenever I saw where he landed, I got super excited because I think this could be the fresh start for a program who was very good last year. But I think that it's proving that this head coach is really willing to just reload it, bring in his new guys and start fresh and still pick up a lot of steam, potentially win 8-9 games next year. We're talking about Carson Steele leaving Ball State, now going to be at UCLA. So the reason I enjoy this one, obviously, Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet have left. They are both either going to the NFL or just kind of retiring from football, or however you want to put it, but they are both departing the program. You will not see them in UCLA next year. So what does that leave you with at running back? Obviously, Carson Steele is your answer. So look at your quarterback now. We had talked about a quarterback that they had transferred in, Carson Schlee. And we talked about that on the last episode when we were grading quarterbacks, and I was not very high on Carson Schlee, but I do think that Carson Steele gives you the opportunity to start Dante Moore and have a true growing tandem potentially for the next 2 years. I would hate to see Carson Steele leave after one because I think it could be a very special ordeal out there. But I think that giving Dante Moore, a running back like Carson Steele, will help him tremendously to improve and feel comfortable on the college football field. So, I've said a whole lot about Carson Steele without saying a whole lot about him, if you catch my drift. But let's talk about why I was so interested in Steele. So, 2,447 rushing yards in 2 years, 20 touchdowns, 323 receiving yards while only being a sophomore and inheriting that eligibility. Yeah, it's at Ball State, but the numbers don't lie. It's hard to be a good running back, in the FCS either way. Like it's a lot different than being like a cornerback or being a receiver where, you're more naturally athletic and, speedier and whatever than the rest of the guys on the field. It's Carson Steele won a lot of his praise by being just an overall running back and finding how to be really good at just about every aspect of the game. So that's pretty transferable, no matter what level you were playing on before. So obviously, he was going to be a very prized prospect this season. UCLA got to him, and he could become one half of that electric duo that I keep talking about with Dante Moore. If you can't tell by my inflection, you can't tell by the way I introduced him, you can't by all these different signs and symbols that are surrounding this one, it's an A+. It's absolutely an A+, because Carson Steele is a very talented running back that absolutely blew up his hype at Ball State. Now he's going to the Pac-12, a very running back friendly, a very offense friendly conference to be in, and he's going to be able to be the focal point of that offense as soon as he touches down. It's going to be something so interesting to watch. And I all season I have been kind of on the UCLA hype train, mostly because I don't like Lincoln Riley, but I've liked UCLA a lot all year. I wasn't much of a fan of Chip Kelly until this season because I saw him starting to put together the pieces that were going to make UCLA good for a long time. And this is just another example of that because Carson Steele is one of the better players in totality that you could have gotten this year in the portal. But again, maybe just my opinion. So the last running back we're going to talk about today, a guy who you could see for bits and pieces of his career was looking like he could have been a really, really prominent and really, really good running back in the SEC, but unfortunately that never came to fruition, so he is also joining the Pac-12. We're talking about Kavosiey Smoke, formerly of Kentucky, going to the CU Buffs, joining Deion Sanders like 40% of the other kids that are in the portal are doing, but he is going to get his last crack, truly his last shot at being a starting running back in the Power 5 because he has been at Kentucky for 5 seasons and this is his last year of eligibility, so it's got to work out. Now let's talk a little bit about Smoke and who he is as a player. I liked watching him in 2019 more specifically, but when Chris Rodriguez emerged, it kind of left Kavosiey out of the loop. You couldn't really feel like he should have been, the starting running back because Rodriguez, I've spoken plenty of times about how I feel about Rodriguez because I think that he was the true star of Kentucky and that not enough people are talking about him. But, it's hard to break into a lineup when you have a running back that is that good. So moving to Boulder, is a bit concerning to me. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. He's likely going to be too old or too inexperienced to make a meaningful jump to the league if he does not have a very good year this year. And, putting the trust of that in a coach who, dude, I get it. Deion Sanders is incredible. I grew up idolizing Deion, not, I was never athletic enough to ever think I was Deion, but, just as impressive as an athlete as it gets, one of those guys that I used to, in 6th, 7th grade, throw on YouTube and watch Deion Sanders highlights just because you hear these folklore and myths and all this about Deion, and all of it was true, but we've seen it at Jackson State. We haven't seen it at a Power 5. And to know you only have 1 year of possibility to make this work and to stick the landing, and you put your faith in the hands of Deion when we have never seen it in the Power 5 before, and also have to trust that he's going to fully utilize you and allow you to kind of be a breakout when his son's the starting quarterback, when, he's got all these other kids coming in. You've got to be concerned about it. You have to be. There's no reason not to be, because you're officially on the clock. It has to work out. I believe the most yards he's ever had is like 430. I don't have it written down or anything, but I don't think he's ever eclipsed 500 yards. Cavassier Smoke hasn't. To think that Colorado is going to be ready as soon as you get there to set up, build shop, and get it moving is scary to me. I've got this one as a C- just because, I do think he's a very talented running back. I do think he could be a potential, guy to watch at Colorado. But as far as stability and as far as, feeling great about projecting him to stick that landing, I can't say I'm there right now. But, maybe, hey, if you've got a different feeling about Cavassier Smoke's transfer to Colorado, or maybe you don't think Carson Steele's that good, or Dylan Johnson, you've got something to say about him, get in the comments. Anybody I haven't mentioned, anybody I have mentioned, future things you want me to talk about, things you want to talk about now, I will, respond and talk to you and have a good time about it. But for now, that is episode 58 of the From My Perspective podcast. And as always, I'll see you next time.